Hello, all you big, beautiful brains out there. Today, we're going to talk about happiness. Before we get started, take a minute to subscribe to Psy vs. Psy. Help out your friendly neighborhood psychologist while I tell you about how to measure happiness. You'll hear psychologists measuring all kinds of weird things, but sometimes they measure things that seem really unmeasurable. Did you know that psychologists can actually measure happiness? Now, by far the most popular way to do this is by using a subjective scale. After all, happiness tends to be an internal thing. People should be fairly good at gauging their own internal happiness. As a researcher, to measure happiness this way, you just give your participants a self-measure, usually a questionnaire or a survey, and simply ask them how happy they are. But this type of self-report measure does have some problems. For one, people seem to be impacted greatly based on the emotions they are currently feeling. So, if you ask someone while they're going through a loss or are especially stressed, they're likely to rate their overall happiness lower. There's actually a 4-question subjective happiness scale that psychologists who study happiness frequently used, called, because psychologists are bad at naming stuff, the subjective happiness scale. But psychologists have way more tools available to them other than just asking self-report questions. I'm talking biological and behavioral. People are often surprised to hear that you can measure happiness biologically, and I'm not exactly sure why. It's generally accepted and known that we can look at biological measures to study things like depression or pain. We can also look at hormones and neurotransmitter levels to study happiness. Now, the neurotransmitters that reflect happiness aren't just the opposite of depression. For instance, if you have a low level of serotonin with depression, that doesn't mean that a high level of serotonin indicates happiness. The relationship between neurotransmitters is complex, but scientists do know that dopamine plays a large part, and we know that there is way more research to be done. As humans, we tend to address and research things that are considered problems first, so there just isn't as much money being funneled into studying happiness. I would argue that if we all want to be happier, maybe we should be advocating more for happiness research. One of the most fascinating ways of measuring happiness is with behavioral measures. Looking happy behaviorally looks different than other emotions. We have tons of behaviors that indicate happiness, like smiling or giggling or laughing, and psychologists can watch participants to get a really reliable measure of happiness that is external to the participant's own thoughts. Psychologists are incredible at doing behavioral studies on happiness, and there is a ton of literature to read out there if you're interested. If you want to know more about how psychology makes you happy, make sure you subscribe to Psy vs. Psy so you can get all of our other videos and you can learn all about the science of psychology. Until next time, keep thinking, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!